Good evening, Agile acquisition enthusiasts, and welcome back to the Underground Digital Tiki Bar. It is Friday night, and that means it's time for another episode of Agile Acquisitions and Alcohol. So cheers. On tonight's episode, we're going to be talking about other transaction authority, a word that's getting a lot of use these days, and I thought it was important to tell you what it is and what it can be used for. Well, other transaction authority, or OTA as it's often referred to, is authority that's been granted by Congress. It is not new authority. It's been around for a long time, about 30 years actually. It was originally provided for NASA, eventually extended to DARPA, and then ultimately to the rest of the DoD and 13 other agencies. Why is it getting so much attention right now? Well, under USC 2371B, the NDA 2016, Congress expanded the use of OTA from basic, applied, and advanced research to include prototyping, and added a provision that said if you complete the original OTA activity, then you can sole source back to that vendor for continued production support, even under FAR contracting. And this is really important. And so OTA essentially is acquisition authority outside of the federal acquisition regulations. Say goodbye to the FAR, say goodbye to the DFARs. This is something that gives you basically a plain white piece of paper to start your acquisition strategy from and negotiate with vendors, especially non-traditional vendors. So why is it so important? Well, in my opinion, it's not important because it allows you to do so many things that the FAR doesn't. In reality, the FAR lets you do quite a bit, almost all of the same things that OT does. The big difference, in my opinion, is it's different. And because it's different, there isn't culture, there isn't pre-existing templates and documents that people just draw from. They're forced to think through the acquisition, not from how did we do it last time, but how should we do it? And that's how things get better. Other transaction authority does have some risks to be aware of. You do have to think through some things that normally the FAR would cover for you, required clauses. You want to make sure that your data rights are covered, and you want to make sure that you have an understanding of terms and conditions and payments, just like you would in any contract. But in this case, you have the opportunity to adjust them as you need to be able to work with the right business partners in the right way. Other transaction authority is used in a lot of places. As I mentioned, it can be used in 13 different agencies, but I see it most often used in the Department of Defense. I commend them for their embracing of it. They still have a long way to go when it comes to how do they apply the definition of prototyping, because when it comes to software development, prototyping is more than just duct tape and wire diagrams of a product. This is actually prototyping all the way through to a production state, which in agile and iterative software development, production can go a lot longer than just an MVP. This gives a lot of flexibility, and it gives it the opportunity to say, we'll draw a line at a particular point and make this a production system, and that's when we transfer over from the OTA to potentially a FAR-based contract and continue on with that vendor. The good thing about it is that it removes a lot of those barriers that non-traditional vendors consider to be impeding to them doing business with the federal government. So what does non-traditional mean, and why is that important to OTAs? Well, the OTA rules basically say that if it's a traditional vendor, that there has to be a cost-sharing agreement. Well, a traditional vendor, as described, is essentially anyone who is not a small business and has done more than $50 million in business. For example, with the Department of Defense and their DoD OTA guide, has not done more than $50 million within a year with the Department of Defense. That opens up that aperture very wide for a whole bunch of small businesses and large businesses that don't typically do business with the Department of Defense, and that's why it's getting so much leverage right now. So there you go, that's OTAs. If you have any questions or comments, please post them here. If you have ideas for topics you'd like to hear me talk about in the future, please share them. Give me a thumbs up if you're enjoying these videos, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks, and until next week, cheers.